or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Laura, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the April 5th issue of the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. A trad wife wakes up in 1855. Yesteryear, a debut novel about an influencer who is transported to the early 19th century, lands the co-author, Carol Claire Burke, in the middle of the culture wars. By Lizzie Goodman. If you're trying to nail down when the trad wife phenomenon entered the mainstream discourse, you might say it was 2024. The seeds were planted during the coronavirus pandemic, and then, in early 2023, a Richmond, Virginia newlywed named Estee Williams went viral for posting about the pleasures of submitting to her husband and asking his permission before leaving the house. The ensuing debate gave a somewhat fringe phenomenon a face to go with its very hashtagable name. It ramped up in May 2024 when, in a commencement speech at Benedictine College, Harrison Butker, the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, told the female graduates they had been fed a pack of diabolical lies by anyone suggesting they would find fulfillment in a vocation other than homemaker. But the concept had officially reached the mainstream after the Sunday Times of London published a controversial profile of the consummate trad wife Hannah Neeleman. Miss Neeleman, a Juilliard-trained dancer, practicing Mormon, turned Maha-coded lifestyle influencer, mother of 8, now 9, children, and founder of Ballerina Farm, a social media-driven 328-acre farm business she runs with her husband, David Neeleman, in Utah, fired back, calling the piece an attack on her family. Into the sea of TikTok rants, roiling editorials, comment section throwdowns about trad wives, women who glorify traditional roles as wives and mothers, and the movement's feminist backlash stepped Carol Claire Burke, a one-time rower at the University of Virginia who grew up in a conservative family and voted for Mitt Romney in 2012. Ms. Burke had time to reassess her worldview on a number of matters when, during the pandemic, she and her husband traveled around the country in an Airstream, and she read work by the leftist political philosopher Noam Chomsky, among others. Ms. Burke has said she became radicalized. A few years earlier, after graduating and bouncing around unfulfilling marketing jobs, she realized she wanted to write fiction and earned a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Bennington College. Like a lot of MFA graduates, she had 2 unpublished novels in a drawer and a literary agent who, she said, never emailed me back. But in January 2024, Ms. Burke downloaded TikTok just in time to wade into the trad wife conversation. After trying to break into more traditional media institutions, like print magazines, she was thrilled to discover a way into a major cultural discussion that dovetailed with her interests in feminism, identity politics, and real-world applications of anti-capitalist economic theory. Ms. Burke's animated, cheery outrage on a number of subjects, especially the trad wife phenomenon, quickly earned her followers. By early 2025, she had come up with an idea for a new novel, one that was very different from anything she had tried before. A psychological thriller about a flawless Christian trad wife influencer named Natalie Heller Mills, who is raising 6 kids and running a multi-million-dollar online business with her pinup farmer husband, and who one day wakes up to discover she has been transported to the year 1855. It would, as Miss Burke has said, push the ideas she had been debating on social media all the way to their conclusion. She even had the title, Yesteryear. What followed was a kind of MFA graduate's fever dream. A first draft that unspooled in a giddy, dizzying 2-month sprint, which set off an international bidding war won by the publisher Alfred A. Knopf for the low 7 figures. Soon after, the film rights sold to Amazon with Anne Hathaway, who said she devoured the novel in one sitting, attached to star and co-produce. I was by myself in Atlanta when I sat down with the printout of the book at 4 p.m., Ms. Hathaway told the New York Times. When I next looked up, I realized it was night and 6 hours had gone by. Caro's writing grabbed me by the throat and wouldn't let go. Yesteryear publishes on Tuesday, and Miss Burke, who is pregnant with her first child, will be going on a book tour this spring that more closely resembles that of a pop act than a first-time novelist, with stops in 20 U.S. cities before she heads to Canada and Britain. It's going to be weird to be pregnant on tour, but also very meta, she said in February. A few weeks ago, Sarah Jessica Parker followed me on Instagram. We'd been trying for a while, and it hadn't been working, and I was like, I don't need a kid. Sarah Jessica Parker followed me on Instagram. That is the biggest accomplishment I could ask for in this life. Then, 2.5 weeks later, we're like, oh my God. What does Miss Burke think Natalie, the protagonist of Yesteryear, would say about this development? The writer smiles. God's plan, baby, God's plan. It's tempting to assume Yesteryear will read like a progressive revenge story in which an ignorant, imperious, conservative Barbie gets her comeuppance. After all, one of the elements most galling to critics of the tradwife movement is how many of its most prominent members are brazenly anti-feminist, while enjoying the liberties made possible by feminists as they build lucrative brands as female entrepreneurs. To want a job, Miss Burke said, you've got to believe in feminism a little bit. Fans and conservative pundits who are familiar with Miss Burke from her TikTok and from Diabolical Lies, the podcast and Substack she founded with the finance writer Katie Gatti Tassin, might be expecting Miss Burke to punish Natalie for her hubris. But in Natalie, Miss Burke has created less a villain and more a warped alter ego, a representative of a path she didn't take, but one whose appeal she recognizes. There is a type of indignation that Natalie feels that I also feel, Miss Burke said. I feel indignant about a lot of what's taking place in our world. I also feel very aware that I'm not going to change any of those systems. The author grew up in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, with a father who worked as a radiologist and a mother who had been a nurse but opted to stay home to raise Miss Burke and her older sister. Miss Burke's childhood was wonderful, she said, but limited. I didn't grow up in a place where there were writers, she said. There were doctors and lawyers. Miss Burke will be the first to tell you that her marriage to Riley Hakon Strand, whom she wed in 2019 when she was 26, gave her the security she needed to pursue her writing career. He financially supported me on a number of occasions when I was writing, she said. No one believed more in me. No one bet on the pony at the race more than him. The couple waited to have children, taking time to figure out what kind of life they wanted to build together. That's another thing with Natalie, said Miss Burke, who was careful not to give any spoilers, as she explained that her character didn't have the luxury of self-exploration. It took me so long to get these beliefs. If I got married at 24 and had a baby, would I be out here talking about, what is heterosexual? No, I'd be busy. I would be working. Unlearning things is a luxury. Asking questions is a luxury. In Yesteryear, Natalie, a lonely, brainy girl from a sheltered religious conservative family in rural Idaho, heads off on scholarship to Harvard, expecting to find her people. Similarly disciplined and driven souls who want to serve him, capital H. Her roommate and foil, Rena Magliotti, is a boy-crazy, social-climbing, insecure, materialistic party girl who rails against the patriarchy. She is the first angry woman in my life, but far from the last, Natalie discovers, as years pass and she contends with faceless online hordes who come to her and her perfect life. But as with much of yesteryear, this outsized Real Housewives-ish us versus them prize fight contains within it more subtlety and incisiveness than is initially apparent. As time passes, Natalie repeatedly returns to thoughts of her former roommate, sometimes with smug satisfaction, other times with anguished envy. Where is Rena now? Becomes a refrain for Natalie when she's feeling lost. That these are often presented as the only two options for women, slutty career girl or repressed housewife, emerges as the tragedy at the heart of yesteryear. We are all sold a bill of false goods, and that's true for conservative women and it's true for liberal women, Ms. Burke said. The point of the book is not that one wins. In Natalie's mind, she added, it's like the alternative doesn't look good. She doesn't want to work in an office and be miserable and poor. And so to pretend that it's like, why didn't you leave your husband and get a job at a marketing firm in downtown Manhattan and be broke and have a kid? It's like, that sounds awful. Ms. Burke doesn't know New York well, though she is planning to move there this fall from Charlottesville, Virginia, where her husband is finishing his master's degree in architecture. It's funny, she said. For a long time I was like, I missed the New York thing. You've got to be 23 and willing to put up with a certain amount of squalor, and that period of my life has passed. But then I thought, I just got the opportunity of a lifetime, the dream debut, and I should be where it happens. I should be in the place where other writers live. The eagerness to be in the center of things and the explicit ambition it implies wasn't really the vibe among her cohort at Bennington. When you go to graduate school for writing, no one is talking about a career. No one is talking about book deals, Ms. Burke said. Everyone is pretending that they don't care, or maybe some people don't care. She felt conflicted about her desire for conventional success and stressed about what she observed as the biggest conversation in the writing world. What is the relationship between being a writer and being a mother, and is it possible to do both? For years, she told herself she couldn't get pregnant until she published her first novel. I think I realized my own ambition by seeing hers, Ms. Burke said of Natalie. When she sold Yesteryear, Ms. Burke said, after years of being like, I don't know anyone in this industry, I don't know if I can make a living as a writer, the door opens, and behind it there are rooms of people who talk about the things I talk about. Ms. Burke is terrified of the huge expectations for Yesteryear. The first printing is 110,000, which is an astonishing number for a debut novel. She anticipates that some of her writing community might resent her for selling out, while others, particularly on the right, will come after her like the angry woman came after Natalie. If Yesteryear goes the way it's supposed to, people will be paid to criticize it, she said. But at the end of the day, like Natalie, Miss Burke wants everything she's about to get. I'm desperate for this to work out, she said, smiling. And also, it's fun. This is so fun. Have you seen the Gen Z pout? Their lips are pursed. Their eyes gaze into the middle distance. Is this a real thing? By Callie Holterman. Picture a face that is blank-eyed and puffy-lipped, like a koi fish on Ativan. That, according to a cluster of recent articles and social media posts, is a textbook Gen Z pout. It is an expression being attributed to young celebrities like Lily Rose Depp, Rachel Sennott, and Ariana Greenblatt, who appear to purse their lips with forensic precision when posing for pictures. Some argue that the look is meant to cultivate an air of chic detachment. Others are not quite convinced. The Gen Z pout is genuinely making y'all look like Homer Simpson, Fatima Sheikh, 19, wrote in a TikTok video. The pout has become a subject of bottomless analysis online, where the slightest of movements by a young person risks being declared a generational microtrend. The designations are not always precise. Miss Sinat, born in 1995, is a young millennial. Just last year, commentators identified a Gen Z stare, a blank look supposedly displayed by teens and 20-somethings when they are asked a question. There have also been skirmishes over side parts, skinny jeans, and crew socks. These labels may be catnip for influencers and media outlets, but how much do they actually register with those they theoretically describe? Sometimes I think it's a little cringe. Gen Z this, Gen Z that, said Miss Sheikh, a former college freshman in Seattle. She thinks it's fun to weigh in occasionally, but cannot see herself pursing her lips in imitation of a celebrity. Say Prohit, 22, who works in clothing merchandising in Princeton, New Jersey, said she did not typically pay much attention to the barrage of behaviors ascribed to Gen Z, but she heard about the pout a couple of weeks ago in a video about the influencer Ashton Earl. Ms. Prohit was surprised when she scrolled through some of her own posts afterward. I realized I kind of did the same thing, she said. The pout shares DNA with the duck face of the 2010s, a stiffer construction favored by Megan Fox and Kim Kardashian. The Gen Z version was called out in 2022 by the writer Rainfish Kwan, who labeled it the disassociative pout in an article for ID magazine. The goal, she wrote, was to look as though you just happened to be photographed while contemplating your abject disaffection with the world around you. Coinages like Gen Z pout tend to be rewarded on an algorithmic social media platforms because they reliably generate debate, said Kelsey Weekman, the writer of the Gen Z culture newsletter, OK Zoomer. Young people like to weigh in on whether a label really applies to their generation. Some older people want to find out if they are still on the cutting edge. Ms. Weekman said she thought the flurry of opinions about pouting was also a product of how much time people spend observing their own faces on screens. Because of that, there's going to be a total breakdown of every single thing you could possibly compare from generation to generation, she said. Perhaps the look is a way of mimicking the lip fillers that have gained popularity among younger people, said Elaine Ficara, 25, who lives in Philadelphia and works at a biotechnology company. Or maybe it's a matter of attitude. If millennials strain to appear flawless online, Ms. Ficara said, young people today want to appear the opposite. Our generation is trying not to come off as tryhards, she added. Paradoxically, looking so disaffected can take quite a bit of effort. When Ms. Ficara tried out a pout last week during her lunch break, she cracked herself up while puckering her lips awkwardly at her phone camera. It's not that natural, she said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Styles section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I think that MAGA is dying. Inside the youth movement at CPAC. At a sparsely attended conservative political action conference, young Republicans were eager to start the post-Trump era. By Nathan Taylor Pemberton. As the first day of the Conservative Political Action Conference wound to a close, the audience inside the airplane hangar-sized ballroom had dwindled as Nick Shirley, the headline speaker, mumbled his remarks. Mr. Shirley, a 23-year-old content creator and recently minted right-wing celebrity, had been tapped by the conference organizers to bring a youthful jolt of energy to the proceedings. But youths themselves and their conservative energy were nowhere to be seen among the rows of empty chairs, as Mr. Shirley made halting reference to Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech. Just outside the hall, 20-somethings in rumpled suits were gathered in clusters, debating the merits of a ground invasion in Iran, the conservative backlash against those who were J-pilled, far-right slang for skepticism of Israeli influence, the back-breaking costs of American life, and what they saw as the slow demise of the Trump era. The majority of us, we don't necessarily come to these types of events for the speakers because generally they dish out the same slop over and over, said Jack Moore, 19, a board member of the Georgia Teen Republicans. They had come hoping to briefly escape the politics of their social media feeds and interact directly with the conservative apparatus at this year's conference, once a marquee event on the conservative calendar. Last year's meetings struck a triumphant tone as Elon Musk cranked a chrome chainsaw on stage and President Trump gleefully recounted the tale of his political comeback. But for the past several years, a younger crowd has declared the event passé. At the 4-day conference in Grapevine, Texas last week, young conservatives willing to take a gamble on this gathering found themselves marooned in a listless and, with the exception of Mr. Shirley, older gathering of Trump loyalists, MAGA B-listers, who preferred to avoid the white-hot debates about the future of the party. These speakers largely stuck to a tame script, sounding their support for the president's war in Iran, whipping up culture war reactions over things like Sharia law, and denouncing the infighting being stirred up by high-profile figures in the MAGA movement. Even Stephen K. Bannon, the former Trump advisor known for his fiery attacks against fellow conservatives, alluded only obliquely to the glaring issues hanging over the conference. In a short speech on Thursday, Mr. Bannon downplayed Mr. Trump's abandonment of his No New Wars campaign pledge and the conference's low-wattage conservative lineup, which most noticeably was missing Mr. Trump. Yes, there are many great people who couldn't make it, Mr. Bannon said in his remarks. They either didn't want to come or they're tied up running wars and looking after the country. It doesn't matter. You came. This is the power of this movement. For all the talk of MAGA infighting and rifts, including over subjects like the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and Israel, many young people in attendance seemed to feel that the starkest split in the party was generational. There is a divide between the young and the old party, said Aidan Hofsis, 19, who had traveled from Maine to attend his first CPAC. We keep hearing these talking points that we're all united and in the same movement. That couldn't be farther from the truth. I feel like I have closer views with liberals than more conservatives at this point. Those views, Mr. Hofsis noted, revolved around issues such as education and health care. It's not fair for someone to graduate college and have $100,000 of debt, he said. We're sending billions of dollars to other countries. Why can't we help our own people? As he avoided the scheduled events and dodged the throngs of older conservatives in MAGA-themed regalia, Mr. Hofsis had met some fellow disillusioned peers along the way. One of them was Joseph Bullock, an Army veteran wearing a bright blue America First hat, a loud symbol in conservative spaces that one is a supporter of Nick Fuentes, the 27-year-old white nationalist known for making racist and anti-Semitic remarks. It's very cultish here, said Mr. Bullock, 30, who was attending CPAC for the first time. It seems like boomers are just on this Trump train, he added. After talking with other young attendees at the conference, Mr. Hofsis said most appeared to be aligned with Mr. Fuentes, who has become a pariah within the conservative movement for, among other reasons, his recent declaration that young conservatives should express their displeasure with Mr. Trump's military strikes on Iran by voting for Democrats. I'd say at least 60% of the young people here are fans of Nick, Mr. Hofsis said. The subject of the war in Iran, a source of consternation for many young people in the crowd, was engaged with lightly on the main stage and otherwise relegated to exhibition hall gimmicks, such as gauging support for the conflict with piles of pinto beans. Matt Gaetz, the former congressman from Florida, offered one of the loudest moments of dissent with Mr. Trump in the event's official proceedings. A ground invasion of Iran will make our country poorer and less safe, said Mr. Gaetz, who is now the host of a nightly show on the conservative One America Network. It will mean higher gas prices, higher food prices, and I'm not sure if we could end up killing more terrorists than we would create. The speech, though, drew a muted response from the crowd, and some remained frustrated. Those conversations are just not happening here, said Samantha Cassell, a 27-year-old Republican strategist. She was wearing a Fishback for Florida hat in support of the rage-baiting Florida candidate for governor, who has energized a coalition of young voters in that state. There's no serious discussion going on. It's just flat. I've gone to lots of these events in the RNC, the DNC, and this is probably the worst one I've ever been to. Some of the far right saw in this generational division an opportunity to claim a young cohort looking for an outlet. Joel Webbin, an online influencer who promotes a brand of nationalism infused with Christianity, wrote that his attendance at CPAC last week revealed one major finding. "The youth are ours," he wrote in a post on X. Elijah Schaffer, a far-right commentator who could be seen roaming the halls at CPAC on Friday in an all-black suit, wrote on X that CPAC 2026 has given me hope for the American youth. Every young man and woman here are all radicalized/based. Among the young Republicans, there were cases of people expressing forms of cautious optimism about the coming midterm elections and tentative support for the president's abrupt choice to attack Iran. But these views were expressed for the most part by attendees with professional aspirations to work in GOP circles. The yawning alienation shared by CPAC's young conservatives extend to those with more moderate taste as well, however. Like their more extreme peers, these traditional conservatives expressed an exhaustion with MAGA's culture war provocations, Mr. Trump's penchant for chaos, and the new class of content creators like Mr. Shirley, whom they saw as offering a shallower mode of conservatism. "They need to go touch some grass," said Jack Greenberg, 23, who participates in social meetups hosted by the Dallas Young Republican Club. Mr. Greenberg, a Trump supporter who works as a real estate developer, expressed dismay that policy had largely been abandoned in favor of rage bait. He laughed as he recounted his meeting with a young content creator at CPAC who claimed to have infiltrated Antifa. "I just want politics to be boring again," Mr. Greenberg said woefully. One thing discussed by many young attendees was how Turning Point USA and its yearly gathering, America Fest, appeared to have displaced CPAC as the movement's center stage for hashing out the party's future. Last year's event, held in Phoenix, was the scene of dramatic infighting between conservative influencers over subjects ranging from Israel's influence to the place of nativism within the party. While many of America Fest's young attendees found those squabbles to be similarly distracting, CPAC's attendees yearned for some of that energy. Without it, people like Ms. Cassell found that there was only one obvious conclusion to reach about the state of Mr. Trump's conservative movement after this past week. "I think that MAGA is dying," she said. "I do." Can you fake being rich? A spate of popular social media accounts offer advice on how to achieve an old money look. By Guy Trebay. Want to look like $1 billion? Social media is here to help. Daily, hourly, seemingly by the second, content creators with handles including Fresh and Classy, Carving Pierre, and Kiki Astor offer tips on how their followers can project wealth even if they don't have much money. "It makes perfect sense to me as a fantasy," said Daniel Hakimi, a lawyer on Long Island who runs The Second Button, a website and Instagram account that gives advice on how to achieve the look of someone whose clothes are custom made. In all likelihood, this fascination has existed in some form ever since social groups began to be sorted by social rank and income. Yet it seems to have grown more intense at a time when unimaginable wealth is increasingly concentrated in a tiny and all but invisible population. As we get poorer, we are more obsessed with the aesthetics of wealth, Mr. Hakimi, 35, said. Alex Gavin Rambet has built a following of nearly 400,000 for his Instagram account, Old Money, which has the motto, "Join the old money lifestyle and dress with class." Mr. Rambet, 21, regularly drills down into the finer points of which shoes, ties, suits, and even manners are required to convey an aura of high net worth. Another influencer, Mads Mura, schools an audience of more than 100,000 in the attainment of old money folkways through a series of how-to reels on his stately Instagram account, Carter Bow. Speaking by phone from London, Mr. Mura, 25, offered a theory on why this kind of thing is gaining traction. What's happening is that we are in a moment of cultural exhaustion, a decade dominated by street culture, outgoing and loud, and we've hit a wall with it. For me, he added, it's not just about the way people dress. It's about how you present yourself, how you respect people, how you express your manners. Mr. Mura may not have known he was echoing the words of social arbiters from a time long before social media, when tips from the pundits Emily Post and Miss Manners helped newspaper readers clamber up the class ladder. The apotheosis of this type is surely Martha Stewart, the acknowledged OG of class-inscribed self-optimization. If previous generations doled out sartorial and etiquette tips by the genteel teaspoon, social media has unleashed a fire hose. The consensus among arbiters of today holds that prominently displayed logos are tacky, that colors should be hushed, and that monochrome outfits telegraph sophistication. They also place great emphasis on the meticulous grooming of nails, skin, and hair. In upper-class circles of old, much of this would have been quietly passed down through the generations. These days, the finer points of achieving an air of sophistication reach a wider audience through more democratic means. Gen Z didn't get a lot of this knowledge that traveled through families, mentorships, and institutions, Mr. Mura said. A lot of that lore got lost. Social media is filling the gap and resurfacing information a generation was starved of. Old Money Secrets, another social media account of this type, comprises videos featuring a silver-haired gent who dispenses advice in a plummy accent on what he terms old money manners. The posts are the stuff of a novel by John O'Hara. He who speaks first loses. Buy land while others chase trends. No one ever got truly rich by being an employee. Filippo Ricci, a scion of the family behind the Stefano Ricci label, whose clientele skews towards those who count their net worth in the billions, seemed skeptical of the notion that the looks and manners of the wealthy could be picked up online. There are all these websites and social media accounts, even subscription sites, telling you how to get dressed and appear different, richer. Though it's always better not to run after something you're not, Mr. Ricci said. The reality is, the authentically rich don't shop to appear rich, he added. For those people, rich is not a costume. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. How far would you go to learn from Werner Herzog? In January, 50 artists from all over the world were chosen to shoot shorts in the Azores, guided by the iconic filmmaker. They just had to find $10,000 and airfare to get there. By Saskia Solomon. There are more cows than people on the island of São Miguel, and at least one of them was about to become a star. For 11 days in January, Werner Herzog, the German filmmaker, hosted a workshop on the island, the largest in the Azores archipelago, in the North Atlantic. And among the 50 attendees, several were considering featuring a cow in their short films. One idea was pitched by Sabri Benalay Sharif, 48, a photographer from Lisbon, and Jill Maledi, 47, a filmmaker from Argentina. Their vision for a short involved a cow entering a church. How will you get a cow up the steps and into the church? Mr. Herzog, 83, asked the duo sternly. You may be doomed, because the cow may be obstinate and never make a single step up there. It may go wild. But you moved a boat over a mountain, Miss Milady politely reminded him, referring to the scene in his 1982 epic, Fitzcarraldo, in which the crew hauled a 320-ton steamship over a steep hill in the Peruvian Amazon. Mr. Herzog shook his head. People think I do the impossible things, but no, I do the doable, he said. I knew that it was possible to move a ship over a mountain. He explained that he had 3 months to tease out the problem. These filmmakers didn't have that time. You have to do the doable, and within the 2 days of shooting you have here, it doesn't seem to be doable, Mr. Herzog said. This was the crux of the workshop. Take your camera, get the shot, forego storyboards, and don't overdo it. And above all else, do the doable. For many, this advice was, if not groundbreaking, then certainly liberating. The participants had traveled from as far as Hawaii, Australia, and India. They were paired up and based on shared cinematic styles and language, and in some instances, compatible star signs. By the end of the 11-day workshop, they had to film, edit, and screen a 5 to 10 minute long film in any style, be it narrative, tone poem, or documentary. They would take inspiration from Mr. Herzog and the island's terrain, its lush green hillsides, black sandy beaches, mist-shrouded tea fields, famous hot sulfur springs, and of course, cows. As the filmmakers brainstormed ideas, Mr. Herzog was transfixed by the idea of the cow in the church. You need somebody who transports the cow in a trailer. You might have to anesthetize the cow and then later reanimate it, he said. And what will the local priest think? The name Werner Herzog has become a kind of shorthand for maverick filmmaking. The man himself is an icon. And yet his conceptually dense movies are hardly box office friendly. Many would describe them as inaccessible, best appreciated by students of film, cinephiles, and other filmmakers as they tackle complicated themes on such matters as life on death row and families for hire in Japan. He is as much of a character, with his German accent, deadpan voice, and irreverent philosophizing, as the lore that surrounds his approach to making movies, even for those who've never seen them. And Mr. Herzog has become a subject of intrigue for a new generation discovering his work, especially after the nihilistic penguin meme, drawn from his 2007 documentary, Encounters at the End of the World, went viral in January, which happened to coincide with his workshop. Mr. Herzog began his Rogue Film School in 2009 in Los Angeles, where he has lived since the late 1990s. The densely scheduled 4-day course cost participants $1,500. The purpose was not to learn how to make films, but to listen to Mr. Herzog, who makes clear that he doesn't teach filmmaking. That belongs in film schools, of which he has long been a vocal critic. Filmmaking, he said, is about managing chaos or wrangling. According to the Rogue Film School website, the workshop was about poetry, films, music, images, literature. Censorship will be enforced, it warned. There will be no talk of shamans, of yoga classes, nutritional values, herbal teas, discovering your boundaries, and inner growth. The workshop sessions were so popular, Mr. Herzog made them longer and more elaborate. He started working with the Barcelona-based production company Exactica Cine, which held them in Cuba, the Peruvian rainforest, and Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. They chose São Miguel for 2026 because its moody, mythic winter landscape was ideal for cinema. Mr. Herzog announced this year's workshop via his new Instagram account, which Simon, his youngest son, had set up for him. Also new was the high price tag, 8,800 euros, about $10,200, which shocked a lot of his Instagram followers who left comments about privilege and trust funds. Love you, dude, but 8,000 euros totally bars working class people from taking the course. Not a fan, wrote one. I'll attend the way 70s Werner would approve. Forging documents, stealing my way in for free, taking your equipment, going insane in nature, read another. In December, applicants had only 6 days between being accepted into the program and depositing the money to secure their places. They crowdfunded, dipped into their savings, and applied for artist grants and loans. One person was rumored to have sold their car. The time span between getting the invitation and wiring the money felt like a shotgun wedding, said Lucas Ackermann, 28, a writer-director from Berlin. There was an overwhelming feeling among those accepted into the workshop that they had earned a prestigious prize or were being appointed by the master himself. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for these filmmakers who swallowed the price tag for what they were receiving in return: a close mentorship with Werner Herzog, contacts with other filmmakers, and an impressive addition to their CVs. Participants like Alexandra Szycha-Panowska, 46, who lives in New York City, were prepared for the cost. To make a short, no-budget music video in New York is $20,000, so this is almost too cheap, she said. Ecstatica Cine explained that the price covers, among other things, room and board, transportation on the island, translators, a database of local actors and locations, a chance for distribution, and, of course, time with Werner Herzog. After paying the organizing team and expenses, about a third of the earnings goes to Werner Herzog Foundation in Munich, which oversees the preservation and conservation of his works. Mr. Herzog captivated his 50 attendees as he recounted stories he had told hundreds of times, many of which appear in his 2023 memoir, Every Man for Himself and God Against All. He talked about growing up in rural Bavaria, his often tempestuous working relationship with the actor Klaus Kinski, and how he hypnotized the cast of his 1976 film, Heart of Glass. After a couple of days, barriers had come down, at least for some. It wasn't that Mr. Herzog's star power had dimmed, they more so had come to learn from him and get to work. Even so, one-on-one time proved tricky. Often Mr. Herzog would advise one filmmaker when an eager crowd would form around him, as if pulled by a magnetic force. Some professed being a little put out by the experience. Before shooting began, Mr. Herzog and Peter Zittlinger, his longtime cinematographer, inspected the group's arsenal, as they termed the camera equipment. Some participants unpacked state-of-the-art cinema lenses and DSLR cameras, while others brought a simple 1990s Sony camcorder. Mr. Herzog said the most important thing was not the camera, pleading, "Please, pretty please, give me a good story." Mr. Herzog instructed them to jump right in. "No time for meditation, no time to wait for inspiration," he said, "and it's a good thing. You have to function like this on a real set." These rules forced a welcome change for the filmmakers, like Ms. Szycha-Panowska. "I've never shot without a screenplay, without a shot list, without a storyboard," she said. "It's sort of like you don't realize how much you know or what you're capable of until you do it." A few months before the workshop, the Ecstatica Cine team engaged a local casting director to create an island-wide casting call. "It's really hard because usually when filmmakers come here, they bring their actors or they only want the people from Azores to do background work," said Ana Lopez, 42, an actress from São Miguel, who also runs a casting agency. She was in Lisbon when she was called in for a role by one of the participants and immediately booked a flight home. "This is so important for me, but also for the local non-actors, because you have 50 filmmakers working here. When do you get that in an island like this?" Ms. Lopez said. Another actress, Teresa Carrero Andrea Rapsodo, a 20-year-old sociology student from São Miguel, was cast in 4 different films. I honestly had never heard of Werner Herzog, she said. Apparently, he's a really important person, so I'm happy to be a part of this project. Halfway through the workshop, Simon Herzog, 36, traveled from Vienna to teach the cohort how to pick locks, a common feature of the elder Herzog's course and useful for locations that were off limits. I learned half from my dad and half from the internet, Simon said. I can open most locks in Romania. Though Simon had attended a couple of his father's Rogue Film School weekends, this was his first workshop. It was a Christmas gift from his father. But Simon's presence also benefited his father's protégés, as Mr. Herzog became more accessible once he arrived, occasionally prompting his father to be more direct. And Simon started his father's Instagram account. We had talked for some time about having some kind of medium to be more proactive about sharing his work, he said. The first video, I Am Werner Herzog, This Shall Be My Instagram, was filmed in the garden of their 16th century cottage in southern Austria, posted on August 2025, and had garnered almost 9 million views. Mr. Herzog does not own a cell phone, so Simon shoots videos when they are together and uploads them later. They made several during the workshop. Simon, who accompanied his father to the Amazon jungle when he shot the 1998 documentary Wings of Hope, believes his father's interest in doing these workshops reflects his love for the craft as well as a desire to establish his legacy. He has a lot of knowledge and wisdom to pass on, he said. I don't think he's particularly precious about it. Mr. Herzog would hold court during mealtimes and continue after dinner, when he would screen clips from his extensive catalog like Aguirre with the Wrath of God, Grizzly Man, and Cobra Verde, hitting pause to draw attention to particular details. Sometimes he would offer insights or snippets from his personal life that would elicit laughter and awe. Any primate can produce a film today, Mr. Herzog said at one point. Incidentally, I have seen a film made by a sheep. You never see me in the tabloids because I have never been at red carpet events. Unless it was for my own film, he also mused. Many of the filmmakers hung on to his every word. He's my father in cinema, said Hao Wang, 33, a director from Chengdu, China, who had previously completed Mr. Herzog's course on the online platform Masterclass. During the workshop, he taught Mr. Wang how to whistle, a skill he believes is important in directing a crew. The adulation proved jarring to Francisca Manuel, 41, a filmmaker from Lisbon. I was not expecting that these 49 people around me would show so much devotion to him, she said. Some of them, particularly the dudes, see him like a god. And this can be a problem for Mr. Herzog. It's very hard for him to find people who are not sucking up to him, and so appreciates a person who is authentic to him, said Mr. Zittlinger, who had worked for Mr. Herzog on more than 20 projects. Most directors are living in a false reality, where everybody is lying to them, he added. It's like people in power. They never get constructive feedback. But Werner's not that way. By the time the shooting started, 6 of the 25 pairs had consciously uncoupled to work alone. Some find it hard to adapt to each other, Mr. Herzog said. The group scattered across the island. Mr. Herzog paid each of them a visit, shuttling between locations in a chauffeured minivan. At the port, there was a shoot where a duo was filming a fisherman fixing one of his nets, talking about his life. Since he's talking on camera all the time, you need silent moments, Mr. Herzog said. It has to be material where he can think aloud. You also have to record the seagulls separately as a sound. You have to collect. Mr. Herzog watched as Jordan McAfee-Hahn and Matthias Durana were filming a cow by the side of the cliff, the gray ocean shimmering silver on the horizon on a windy afternoon. Their film, which they called Lola Dreams of the Sea, featured a young farmer running after Lola the cow, who was inexplicably drawn to the body of water. The cow playing Lola did not want to sit down. She complained loudly, until finally she complied and crouched on the grass. Shouldn't we have her looking out towards the ocean? Mr. McAfee-Hahn called over the wind. No, it's good with the ocean as a backdrop, said Mr. Herzog, suggesting the duo shoot a close-up of the cow's face to capture Lola's emotional responses. Leave her there. The cows were very difficult to work with, as Asreen Zagnana, 28, discovered. The cows were really moody. They didn't want to interact with my actor, said the Iraqi-American film director. Originally, my protagonist was going to be really affectionate with the cows. He was going to hug and kiss them, but they weren't having it. They just stormed off. To become good soldiers of cinema, Mr. Herzog told participants they must learn to roll with the punches. And when it came time to bid his protégés farewell, following a screening of their finished works, Mr. Herzog surveyed the group with his piercing gaze. The world as filmmakers is yours now, he told them. The world is yours. You will go out, but you should remain rogue. My advice is to form rogue cells everywhere. Many grabbed every opportunity to sit next to Mr. Herzog and ask questions or pontificate, while a few chose to quietly absorb the filmmaker's wisdom from a distance. Like Dean Wee, a filmmaker from Beijing. I just wanted to listen to him. Modern love. May I end my life with you? My friend made the weightiest decision possible while staying at my home. I struggled with what it meant. By Julie Raymer. If my friend Beth Mazur had asked, "May I end my life while I'm visiting you?" I would have said no and done everything I could to stop her. But she didn't ask. When she arrived in Santa Fe in mid-December of 2023, my husband John and I had just finished building our casita, a tiny guest house, and Beth was our second guest. She and I had only met in person a few brief times before. Yet as her 5-day visit drew to a close, we were so comfortable together that John and I asked her to stay through Hanukkah and Christmas. The only problem, John joked, was we had run out of the chocolates she had brought. A dozen years earlier, Beth and I met in an online patient group that felt like part laboratory group, part refugee camp. We were both sick with myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME/CFS, a devastating disease medicine has mostly abandoned. As a science journalist, I was stunned to find myself desperate enough to chase treatments at the edge of science. Beth, a fellow MIT alumna and computer scientist, had a calm, reasoned approach that made it feel safe to examine even the strangest of ideas. Over the years, I wrote investigations about near-fraudulent science and a memoir-cum-science book about ME. Beth, quieter but further-reaching, co-founded the advocacy organization #MEAction, transforming an angry, chaotic patient community into a coordinated force for change. She organized protests, lobbied Congress, urged Google to rewrite its medical pages on ME. Each morning during her visit to Santa Fe, I brought her gluten-free muffins while she worked painfully to attain verticality. Each afternoon, she curled up on the couch while our cat, Lau, settled into the perfect hollow between her belly and the heating pad, and our dog, Rue, rested her throat on Beth's scratching fingers. I massaged Beth's head and neck. We hurt in the same places, so my fingers knew where to go. I felt myself channeling every soothing touch John had given me, grateful that I was well enough to pass the comfort forward. I had been through a brutal 4 years, multiple neurosurgeries, seizures, paralysis, but recently I'd been improving. Beth's visit felt shockingly normal. We even went to a spa. For her, though, the illness never offered dramatic swings. It just ground on relentlessly. We talked about all ME had taken from us. From her, it had stolen her career, her imagined children, snowboarding, often even the strength to get out of bed. But the worst theft was her brilliant technologist's mind. She told me she constantly felt confused, as if every attempt to engage with the world required smashing her fragile brain through a wall of concrete. "I feel like I don't really exist," she said, her voice small. Her cognitive dysfunction didn't show. From the outside, her brilliance still blazed. but that invisibility deepened her frustration. She had tried hundreds of treatments, each demanding research, money, risk, sometimes travel, always the resummoning of hope. None had restored her injured brain. On top of her physical and cognitive suffering, I occasionally saw depression twist her thoughts into dark, sticky spirals. Once, when I felt her descending, I asked her to recall a time she felt safe. She remembered being 19, hanging out with college friends. I invited her to sink into that feeling, but her voice grew hoarse. "It's been so long. I never feel safe anymore." She had fought the depression as powerfully as she fought ME, trying treatment after treatment. Antidepressants had failed her, but she was about to try them yet again. On the eve of the winter solstice, we built a fire. She rested her head on my lap. I stroked her impossibly soft hair. "If I knew I'd never get better," she said, "I'd end it. But I know how much that would hurt the people I love. But then I'm just living for other people, and..." I listened, knowing all too well the thoughts that can intrude as suffering grinds on. I hoped that simply witnessing her pain might ease its weight. Eventually, yawning, I extricated myself from the cuddle pile to go to bed. Lau's eyes were squeezed tight with pleasure. She stroked his fur, her breathing steady. In the morning, I received an email from her with the results of her cognitive testing. In some areas, she was in the first percentile, the bottom of the scale. I wondered why she sent it. Of course I believed her. Then a FedEx driver knocked on our door with chocolates Beth had ordered to replace those we had eaten. "Did you know someone is lying over there?" he said. She had created a nest for herself next to the frozen stream with a blanket and pillow. Beside her was an empty, residue-coated glass. Not long after I found her, I received a text she had scheduled to be sent after her death. "Please don't feel bad in any way. I cannot imagine a better last evening. Even Rue and Lau joined the nurturing." Ridiculously, she apologized for not cleaning our casita. The police went through a notebook she had left. Alongside a scrawled will, she wrote, "I feel at peace. It's a powerful feeling." After everyone left and my gasping tears settled down to a seep, I sat quietly in my house. It seemed as though I could feel in my body the news of her death spreading, the cries moving from family to close friends to people around the world. I tried to imagine her thoughts the previous night. Had I upset her? Was her decision justified, or had she made a terrible mistake? I stopped myself. I had to believe her words and my own experience. She felt loved when she died, and I couldn't possibly judge her decision, not knowing what it was like to live inside her body and brain. 3 years earlier, she had almost done this, but had stayed instead. For those 3 years, she had given herself to the world, continuing to fight for ME patients, to offer me her friendship, to support everyone around her. Rather than judge her decision to leave, I felt grateful for all her decisions to stay. So why now, here? Did she imagine what this would do to me? Well, where else? I wouldn't have wanted her partner to find her, or her mother, or a friend with children in the house. Maybe the sweetness of our time together made her terrifying act possible. Maybe she trusted me to have the strength to handle it. Did I? I thought about how she had endured the night's cold. That had to have been for my sake, protecting the new casita from traumatic images. These questions I knew I would chew on for years, but I felt an immediate clarity. Regardless of whether I agreed with her choice, accepting it and caring for her community after her death were the ways to love her. I wrote a social media thread telling the community what I understood about her death. For a week, we held daily online Shivas, gathering dozens from across the globe. Her memorial drew hundreds in person and on Zoom. People told stories that revealed a scope I hadn't seen. She educated researchers and persuaded the CDC to create ME/CFS research centers. She and her partner were among the first to warn that COVID was likely to trigger a wave of ME/CFS cases. She became a godmother to long COVID advocates, teaching them how to gain influence, strategize, and care for one another. She had been so modest about her work, I'd missed that she was the hidden wizard behind nearly every significant shift.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents